Welcome to the podcast Leaders of Today, Teens to Titans. I am so honored to have our guest, Josh Colwell, for the interview today. Some leadership stories are forged quietly through survival, resilience, and the decision to keep going when life feels unsafe. Josh's story is one of those. Josh is a person in long-term recovery with lived experience in both the justice system and the recovery world. He currently serves as Vice President of Business Development for Brighter Day Recovery and Executive Director of Restoration Recovery, where he has helped build programs that now support individuals and families across New Hampshire. His work has earned statewide recognition. But long before titles or accolades, Josh was a teenager, struggling with deep issues of self-worth, safety, and abuse, both in his personal life and systems meant to protect him. Those early experiences shaped the path he walked, the challenges he faced, and ultimately, the leader he's become. Today, Josh uses his lived experience to both guide programs and truly see people, to advocate, support, and remind others that healing is possible. This conversation is about where that journey began and how it shaped him, what it has meant to turn pain into purpose. You're listening to Today's Leaders, from Teens to Titans. Hi, I'm Lorraine Connell, a teen leadership coach. I transitioned from teaching chemistry to coaching teens in leadership, helping them realize they can do hard things. We've often believed that leadership is an innate trait, but it's actually a skill that you build and improve. On this show, you'll meet today's leaders who share their teenage experiences, revealing how they developed confidence, direction, and the tools to become the leaders they are now. You'll discover how you or the teens in your life have the potential to become confident leaders, even if it doesn't seem possible. Welcome, Josh. It's so wonderful to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So, as I do with all of my guests, I'm going to ask you to take a trip down memory lane and take us back to the teenage years that we found Josh.
Yeah. So I grew up in Rochester, New Hampshire. I grew up with a single mom most of my childhood. My dad was in and out of my life. And my mom started dating this guy when I was 12 years old. And, we moved around a lot. I actually went to every elementary school in Rochester, and there's a lot of them. And at the time, I didn't realize what the situation was. I just really thought that my mom wanted to move a lot. And that really caused a lot of resentment when I was growing up. So just a lot of moving around with my dad coming in and out. I have two older siblings, one younger sibling, and my oldest sibling also was getting into a lot of trouble. I started getting into a lot of trouble when I was in my teenage years. So 12 years old, I ended up going to juvenile court for the first time. And the first time that I went to juvenile court, they had, I guess for lack of a better word, sentenced me to a group home. So they did a group home search. I was a Chin's petition kid. So I ended up getting put into a group home when I was 13. I turned 13 in August. I ended up in the group home in September of that same year. And at that time, I was really scared. I was really attached to my mom. There was a lot of uneasiness in my home because of my mom's boyfriend. He had like a hands-on approach to us. And so myself and my siblings, we weren't big fans of him. I felt like I got the brunt of it because I was the loudest one, and I would stick up for my siblings, and my oldest sister as well would do the same. But I was the oldest boy, right? I thought it was my job to have to take care of my siblings, my mom. And because of that, I felt like I got the brunt of the abuse that we endured because of that. Man. So at the time, like it caused a lot of anger and resentment in me, and I lashed out a lot. I, ran away from home. I was kind of a wild child to the point that like my mom didn't know how to handle me. So that's how I ended up in the juvenile court system. Yeah. So I got sentenced to this group home and had no like expectation or whatever. I remember somebody asked me, they said, "What did you think you were going there for?" And I never really even thought about it until somebody had asked me that question. And then I think what I was going there was to learn how to behave. That's what I really felt like what I was going there for and what the mission of this place was. While I was there, it was like the third day I was there that you learn, they teach you this program where there's cues, they call it. They called it. I'm not even sure how it's run now, but you were not allowed to do certain things. And if you broke those rules, they would cue you, they would call it. And then you would escalate through the cues. And then in the end, if you were behaving, they would put you in this room called the process room. And it was like a solitary confinement area, and they lock you in there. And like, I remember it was just my third or fourth day there, and I was crying on my bed, and they told me that I was being disruptive and said that I needed to go to the process room if I could, and I was like, I'm not going there. And at that time, 3 staff members made sure I went there. And, they were very soft about it. And that was a continuing thing during the whole time I was there. And I was there from 95 to 97. And all those times I was there, 11 times I was put in that process room. And of those 11 times, 9 times they quote unquote physically assisted me to the process room. So I went from, I felt like an unsafe situation, right? From the state taking me from that situation into another unsafe situation, and then leaving that unsafe situation and going back to my mom's house. It wasn't until I actually left that place that I started drinking and using the substances. The first time that I drank, I was 15 years old. And the first time I started using substances was around that same time as well. And that was kind of what my teenage years looked like, was me seeking out other people that drank and drugged like I did. I would be partying on the weekends and going out with my friends. Some of them were also sent to group homes as well. During that time, a lot of us got sent to group homes and detention centers. And a lot of us also experienced what I had experienced. This. Some people experienced way worse than what I experienced, right? So it's like, I think with that, not knowing it, right, that's when I started like just feeling like an outsider, not feeling like I was safe ever, which is a really wild thing to say now. I've had conversations with my wife about this stuff, and she's been really supportive of helping me get through it. And I also, have a therapist and all that. But yeah, so my teenage years just basically running wild still, not to a point, but I got really good at hiding, sent away again. So I got really good at like being deceitful and like living in the shadows, basically. So from the outside world, I don't think anybody would see it, right? Like, I don't think my mom saw it. I don't think that like I was drinking and drugging all the time. My dad, like I said, he was in and out. So I would like see him occasionally, but yeah, I was really uncomfortable in my own skin for a very long time, especially my teenage years. Didn't feel like I had a place ever. I was never like a specific style kid, right? You had your skateboarders, you had your goth kids, you had all these. I was all of them, right? Because I didn't know who I was. So like one day I'm wearing Vans and Janko pants, and the next day I'm wearing corduroys and a tie-dye, right? And I remember somebody making a comment to me even back then about that. They're like, "You're not one style." And it was because I didn't know who I was, or like I wanted to just be liked by everybody because I didn't like myself, right? So I would do whatever I could to make that happen. I ended up dropping out of high school after my junior year of high school. It was one of those situations where they told me that I wasn't going to graduate with my class because my freshman year was a disaster. Like, I ended up getting 1.25 credits, I believe, that year because I was skipping school all the time. I just didn't do schoolwork. I mean, I was still, now looking back at it, I see it, but at the time I didn't. I was still hurting from what I was dealing with before, right? Yeah, so that's dropped out of high school, moved down to Florida, lived with my aunt down there for a little while, got my own place down there, just lived down there for a couple years and came back when I was 19 years old. And then, and then I hit my 20s. And my 20s were a wild time too, because the party didn't stop until I was 36 years old. And it just got progressively worse over time. But the teenage years was definitely the foundation to those partying times. I lost trust in the government, like the criminal justice system. I lost trust with like adults, male adults. I didn't feel safe around a lot of people. And at that point, because of that, I also, created this persona that I was this big tough guy, just so people wouldn't, mess with me and I wouldn't have to deal with them. And that followed me for a long time and got me in some trouble because of it too, as well, later on in my life. But that's what my teenage years look like.
And I know for anyone listening, Josh's story continued on pretty crazy for many people. And if you want to listen to that, I know that he does some interview with, remind me what the organization.
So Everproven, the gym in Dover, I did an interview with Matt, who owns Everproven.
And so we'll put that link in the notes if people want to know more about Josh's story, because there's so much. And I guess there's lots that I want to ask you, but I want you to reflect for a moment on what the purpose of that sentence to the juvenile center, like in thinking back, not what ended up happening. Do you think there was some merit to what the intent was? And then I want to ask you a little bit about like the myth of what you were going to, but going back to when you were 12 or 13, when you were sentenced, what do you think that process was intended to do? And do you think at that moment in your life that was the right step if the juvenile detention center hadn't been what you experienced, but maybe along the lines of what you could have gotten out of that?
It's funny because it was the first time I'd ever gone to juvenile court, right? Back then they had a bunch of pieces of paper that had your charges on it, right? And each charge was a different piece of paper. And then you would, on the piece of paper, you would check mark either true or not true. They didn't do guilty or not guilty. They just said true or not true. So if you didn't believe that you did it, you said that's not true. And then you would have, I guess, a trial for it. I don't know, because my lawyer at the time told me, right, just plead true on all of these.
Wow.
Right? Because I was like, I didn't do that. I didn't and she was just like, just plead true on all these and they're going to give you community service. And I was like, okay, cool.
Right.
Like, I'll go wash police cars on the weekend, right? And in fact, like, if I go wash police cars on the weekend, I can brag about it at school too, right? Guess what I did? Like trying to show people somebody I'm really not, right? And I sat there and the judge came in and the judge knew my mom from my oldest sister because, like I said earlier, she was getting in trouble. So he basically told me, we're not putting your mom through what your sister put your mom through. So we're going to look for you to do a group home search. So there was a couple different options. So I never went to YDC, right? Like I was threatened to go there at one point. I guess the piece, what I really want to say is that this abuse happened everywhere. And one of the big reasons why the YDC case is being more publicized was because they were state employees, right? But I feel like the culture in the 90s was what it was. It happened at multiple different locations, facilities, group homes. So I just want to preface it with that.
Yeah.
So I think that, the intention was, I don't know if it was, let's get this kid out of his mom's hair, give her a break. Like looking back on it, kind of feel like that's what it came to. They were like, well, you're not going to do the same thing your sister did to your mom, right? And it's like, wait, what? I mean, there was definitely a therapeutic piece to it where I was at, right? So I think some of the intentions were true intentions, but you also have a staff at the time that are in their early 20s.
Yep.
Right? And taking care of these kids that come from troubled homes. A lot of the kids that I was there with, came from vicious households. And I just remember hearing some of the stories and like comparing and being like, well, at least I'm not going through that. Right. And up until recently, like if you would have asked me how my childhood was, I would have said it wasn't bad. wasn't bad, right? But I think that some of the intentions were good. I think some of the tactics were not. And I think that when you have young people, some of them had college degrees, some of them didn't, right? Some of them went to school for adolescents with developmental problems, but some of them were just aides that didn't have any experience at all. And you have children like myself who were very vocal about certain things. And I think that I could intentionally get under your skin. And I think that a lot of us did that. And it was more of a defense mechanism than anything. Again, a lot of us came from homes that weren't very safe. I mean, my home was a lot safer than some of the households I've heard about, right? And so I think that there should have been more oversight. I struggle with this too, if I'm being completely honest, is I struggle with if like what they were doing if they thought was going to correct our behavior some of it, right? Like, did they do it because they thought it was the right thing to do? Or did they do it because we were aggravating them?
Yeah. Likely from the experience you describe, it was the latter of the two. Right.
Because there was times, I mean, I was roughed up pretty badly. So I have since seen my resident file from there, and that opened up a whole bunch of other stuff, weirdo. But one of the incidents I remember, and I didn't even remember it until I read it, it was we're assisted to the process room twice in one day.
Wow.
And that same day, they hurt me bad, right? And I was telling them they hurt me, and they made a report about it. And then they sent a letter home to my mom downplaying the whole thing. I would like to think, and I really think that if my mom knew what was going on there, it wouldn't have happened. She would have pulled me from there. She would have been doing something to fight for me to not be there. I've never really even sat down and talked to my mom about any of this stuff, even currently, right? So if she listens to this, it's going to open up her eyes to a lot of things too.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think the intention of sending us all away was to try to, they thought it was going to fix us somehow. Because I think in the 90s, because I mean, some of these places were open in the 60s and 70s and 80s, you know, but something about the 90s, like they got to a point where they were just like, we need to start throwing these kids away. The throwaway kids, the term that I've heard, you know, and the kick in the gut when I think about that.
Yeah. As you reflect, is that how it felt? There's a reason why we use that term, right? Because that's exactly how it was intended and how the response was.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, first time ever going to court, they're telling me,
yeah, it sounds like in many spaces, as you were a young teen, things escalated really quickly, really high, without really any guidance or understanding. And if your mom was at a point where she was just trying to make ends meet, and like a lot of the moving was in order to stay afloat, like the means weren't there to protect, and the system just engulfed you. And so it was like escalation to put you in the juvenile system, and escalation within the juvenile system really set the stage for your later years where many challenges existed for you.
For sure. Yeah. And I think, you know, my wife calls it the missing puzzle piece.
If you're listening to this podcast, you're already part of something bigger. You're part of my advocacy team. Leaders of Today and Peers Not Fears exist to amplify voices at the age when so many of us were having moments that shaped who we became, sometimes in silence, sometimes without support. These conversations are about what happens when voices are heard earlier, when leadership is named, and when young people are reminded that they matter. As we move from building these programs to sharing them more widely, my ask is simple. Help us carry these stories forward. Share an episode, talk about the work, pass it along to someone who works with youth, supports teens, or believes in the power of early leadership. Because when we normalize telling these stories and believing in young voices, we don't just change individual lives, we change what's possible.
And she made that comment to me, and it made complete sense. Like it clicked, like because she was reading the stuff over my shoulder as I'm reading it. So we're reading it first at the same time together.
Wow.
Right. And we're both in tears, because some of the stuff I didn't remember. They didn't think that some of this paperwork was ever going to see the light of day either. Or some of the staff members there really wanted to get the information out, but it just wasn't getting out. Right. I remember one specific staff member that was like my safe place. And I feel like if he could have done more, he would have done more to help me, not to,
Right.
But I think it was just a system where it was just spoken in an echo chamber, because he's the only one that I could find in all the documentation that actually said, Josh has come to me and said he feels like he's being abused here.
Wow. And at that age, you're 13, 14, or 15, to be able to voice that, it says that person was safe enough for you to use that word. So I want to fast forward, because your life really churned in a different direction when you were faced with incarceration for a second time. So is this when you were 36?
Yeah.
I want you to talk about, from that moment, what shifted for you and how you're using that now as the launch pad for the work that you do.
Absolutely. So 36 years old, I was arrested by the feds. And that really was an eye-opener. I've always been a go big or go home type of person, including my crimes, right? Like the first time I ever got truly arrested was from the feds. And like that was honestly scary, right?
Yeah.
And I remember sitting in a jail cell, and I was in a holding cell waiting to go see a judge. And they had more people come in, we were all going to see the judge that day. And one of them asked me where I was coming from. I told him, and he told me that the place I was coming from was a nice jail. And I said, I don't want to know what the nice jails are. I don't want to be at enough jails that I can compare. Well, this one has these accommodations. This one has such accommodations. So that was kind of the first click. I was like, all right, what am I doing here? This is not who I really am anyways.
Right.
Right. I've been putting on this persona, this fake front for the last
24 years. Yeah.
Like, I just was like, this is not me. At that time, I was severely addicted to stimulants, and I was drinking a lot. I was addicted to both drugs and alcohol. And so I just remember the judge telling me, we're going to release you, but you can't drink and drug anymore. And I agreed to it, not meaning it, right? Just saying, yeah, whatever you said, just get me out of here, right? And I got home, and I remember laying in this hammock that I had in my living room, and I just laid there scared out of my mind for like 2.5 weeks. And I just like trying to figure out like what I'm going to do with my life. So I ended up going into a recovery community organization. They set me up with a recovery coach, and then they set me up with a recovery plan and helped me. And I would meet with them every week. And I started going to 12-step meetings. And so my plan was to get rid of the stimulants, and I would stop drinking long enough to get through my court stuff. And then my plan was to start drinking again, right? Like, because I'm an adult, I should be allowed to drink. And so I just really focused on what do I got to do to stop using stimulants? I don't want this to be the reason why I go to prison forever, right? And so I was sober enough because I had been under the influence consistently since I was probably 18 years old. I was under the influence of something, either marijuana or cannabis, alcohol, cocaine, right? They're different substances, but I was always under the influence. So this is the first time in my adult life where I was sober enough, long enough to sit there and say, this is not what I want to do. And so I will say that one of the best things the courts did at that time, was they set me up with a late act counselor, and I was able to talk with this counselor. And stimulants, you use enough stimulants, you don't think straight, right? And I remember it was the first time that I was talking to somebody and they didn't tell me I was crazy. I was like, this is what I'm thinking. And he knew, like, all right, Josh isn't making complete sense right now, but he didn't shame me over it. Just questioning. He's like, why do you think that? And it got me thinking. So he really helped me get through that part of my life. And another thing was, when I had gotten arrested or when I had gotten released, the pretrial officer that they hooked me up with didn't give me any resources. He just said, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do this, but didn't hand me any resources to do it. So I had to, like, if I didn't go into SOS is the name of the recovery community organization that I went into. If I didn't go in there, I wouldn't know where the meetings were. I wouldn't know how to get a recovery coach. I wouldn't know the resources that were available to me as a person seeking recovery. So I'm going through all these things, and it clicked for me that I knew that I couldn't do what I was doing any longer. So I needed to figure out a new career path, but I didn't know what that was going to look like until I met, she's a really good friend of mine now, even her name's Ashley. She was the head of the criminal justice program at SOS. And I could see that she was helping out all these people that in the justice community and like getting them hooked up with resources, helping them get on their feet. I was one of them. And I had gotten the opportunity to sign up for AmeriCorps, which is a national service program. And I did a year of that. And when I did that, like I was volunteering, I was serving at SOS and as a recovery coach. And I got to go through the Recovery Coach Academy and I got to help others. It felt so good. I felt like I had purpose finally. And so I went through that. And while I was serving, I was like, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to start helping people. And I started doing that. And I got hired there after I got done serving there. And then after I got hired there, I became the manager of the criminal justice program. And I got to meet with probation officers. I got to meet with judges. I got to meet with prosecutors. I got to meet police officers. And it was just a really weird experience because another part of my story was I was in a motorcycle club for a long time in my adulthood. And so they were the enemy. And now I'm sitting at the same table with them. And there was some that definitely were not happy that I was sitting at the table. Right. And they were pretty obvious about it. And granted, I mean, I wasn't a trustworthy guy. So it's not like I got sober and all of a sudden everybody needs to trust me now. Years of proving that I am not the person to trust. But I still sat there and I sat through some really uncomfortable conversations and where people would tell me that they didn't trust me. And I actually had a lot of respect for that because I'd rather you tell me where I'm at. But from that, I have built some really good friendships and relationships. And I got to see, and they've gotten to see, I think it worked both ways, that that we're not so much different. We just took different paths. And like one of the guys that I talked to quite a bit, I consider him a friend now. He's in law enforcement. And we have talked about doing a podcast together because we come from two different worlds. But the more we talk to each other, the more we realize we are the same.
100%. I love that. I love that idea so much for so many reasons. Because you're right. We're playing these parts in our lives and we see the opposite at odds with us. But in reality, we are human together. And if we start from that basis that we are humans, then there's so much more that we'll find that we have in common. When we spend all of our lives looking for our differences, that's where the conflict exists. Josh, I have a question for you about when did you feel safe again? So we said right around age 12, things you didn't feel safe. When did you feel that safety again?
It's going to sound super cliche. When I got together with my wife.
Yeah.
It was the first time, like, because I was 100% honest with her from the get. The first time we had a conversation, I told her all my wreckage. I'm like, this is who I am. This is the stuff I've experienced. This is what I'm going through currently. And there was a lot of baggage. And she, in turn, said, okay, cool. When we were meeting up, I felt like, wow, like it didn't matter to her. She has a story of her own. And it was the first time that I was able to lean on somebody and didn't feel like I was being judged. I felt like I had a true partner. Like I had somebody that had my back and like would get upset if other people were talking bad about me or my previous past. Her family were very cautious of me when I first came around there, right? Because unfortunately, a lot of my adult life could be found on the internet. But she always had my back. And it was the first time ever in my life that I had anybody ever truly have my back. And it's like the club was no more. My parents, I didn't feel right like that they truly had my back 100%.
There's all these people, and you said you lost trust in adults, right? So like there's this mentality that the adults are meant to keep us safe. And in every instance in your life, up until you met your wife, who was an adult, that they all failed you. Even when you were in the motorcycle club, who many might say, yeah, that's the whole premise, is having each other's back. But like in reality, it's still self-serving. So how do you create that safety for others?
So I try to be as judgment free as possible, right? Like I want people to be able to feel safe around me when they're talking. Like I'm a big dude and I try to make myself small, if that makes any sense. Like not like I'm less than. When I'm talking with somebody that I know is going through a lot, I will lower my voice. I'll even try to not make it as scratchy. And I'll try not to have any expression if they say something pretty wild, right? Well, because I feel like some people, once they see a reaction, then they're like, oh, I can't tell this person this.
Right.
So I try to listen. And now I help people get into treatment. I'm a partner in a treatment program. Now I took on a role to run a sober house. So what I try to do is provide a safe space, and they're adults, right, that I work with, but some of them are very young adults, right? And I just try to provide a space that people feel safe enough to talk. And when they do have a reoccurrence or whatever, I want them to know that I'm not going to judge them for it, because I feel like if people feel judged, they don't say anything. And if they don't say anything, they die. And so what I'm doing these days is I just try to be as helpful as I can. Like, I don't want anybody ever coming out of jail and having zero resources. I'm going to share my resources with everybody. And I get phone calls still to this day from probation and parole officers, from police officers, from judges that call me and ask me for resources. Like, what can help here and there? And we brainstorm together. Or if I already know what resource, I tell them, right? And I'll say that it's been really awesome to be able to do that, to help and try to provide as many resources as possible and create a safe space. Somebody was at the center that I work at and am part of, and they made the comment, they said, this doesn't even feel like a treatment center. And I said, perfect. That's what we're going for.
Because life is not a treatment center, right? Like we have to live life. And if we go to a treatment center, it's going to feel like we're not really living. And so we have to learn how to, I mean, I guess this is my perception, is that if you can be successful in a recovery center, that does not always translate to being successful in life. So our recovery centers that mimic or don't feel like a recovery center are probably more successful in helping us transition into being successful at life.
100%. And I think like one of the biggest things that we push, one of our core values is empowerment. We want people to be empowered to be able to be successful in their own recovery and not have to rely on a treatment program to be successful. What I've learned in my own personal recovery is the more recovery capital, we call it, is built around us, the more successful we are. So that's what we're trying to do. The more resources that you have at your hand, the more successful. And that's why it was wild to me looking back that I was handed zero resources, but told to be successful.
I mean, it's very much a system that is in dysfunction. And I think like people like you are working to change that system, and it's going to take a lot more of you to do that. Tell me, this may be hard, but go back to Josh, who was 12 years old. And I don't know what kind of advice, but like, what advice would you give to that 12-year-old, not necessarily who is Josh, but who today, 12 years old, facing all of these challenges and looking for an adult to support them?
That they're not all bad. There are definitely people in this world that are out to help. What is it, Mr. Rogers? Find the helpers. Look for the helpers.
Yeah.
I would tell them that, first off, if they're experiencing any abuse, it's not their fault. Sorry.
Please take your time. This is hard because this is that inner child work, right? Like, you just want to go back and hug that kid and say, look at who you become after all of that. Look at who you are.
And I think that would be a big thing to say, right? Is that don't allow the people that are pushing you down or hurting you to determine your life path. And if it gets to a point where that noise is preventing you from growing, to seek therapy, to seek people that have an understanding of that. And, peer support, I think, is huge, to find other peers that may have experienced that and have grown, and to work with them. But yeah, just don't let people crush you. We're worth way more than what we may think we are worth at the time. And it took me many years to realize that. And don't allow them to navigate your own feelings. You're worth it, right? You matter. And that's some of the most important things that I wish people would have told me back then. And I wouldn't have believed you if
No,
told me
right.
it would be here, right? Like, just don't give up. And if one person's not hearing you, talk to two people. If two people aren't hearing you, talk to three people. You're going to find somebody that's going to hear you. I think the abuse happened a long time in the 90s because people were afraid to speak up.
Yeah.
Because one or two people would be silenced. And so the rest of us would see that we were silenced. There's always power in numbers, and just know that you're not alone, and just keep moving forward. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., my favorite saying is his speech about just moving forward. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. Just keep moving forward. Yeah, you're going to get through this. Don't give up.
We are recording this in January 2026. How long have you been sober?
So 7+ years. October of 2025 was 7 years for me. So
amazing. And we are so grateful for the work that you do today. And you wouldn't be doing this work if that path hadn't occurred for you. So love that boy, love that person, because he's here today telling us this story. And the purpose of sharing your story is to remind the people out there that they're not alone. We're all here. We're all trying to figure out our own paths. So if people want to connect with you, Josh, tell us how to reach you. Are you on social media? Or do you have a way for us to reach out?
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. For LinkedIn, it's Joshua Colwell. And then also I'm at Brighter Day Recovery. So you can hit me up at josh@brighterdayrecovery.com. And the website for Brighter Day Recovery is www.brighterdayrecovery.com. And those are the easiest ways to get a hold of me. Email is the best because my phone is always ringing. I literally have 13 text messages from just this hour right here. So email is best way to get a hold of me. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you for being brave today. Thank you for sharing your story. And we look forward to supporting you every day from now on.
Thank you so much.
Are you ready to help the young people in your life unlock their inner strength and step confidently into leadership? The new workbook from Peers Not Fears, Your Voice Matters, Uncovering Your Unique Leadership. It's designed to help teens see the leader in themselves, step by step. It's not just a workbook. It's the first step towards a ripple effect that could change lives. Let's turn today's teens into tomorrow's titans. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Leaders of Today, Teens to Titans. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with other parents who might benefit from this conversation. Together, we can support our teens in building healthy, positive relationships and become leaders of tomorrow. Until next time, I'm Lorraine Connell, and this is Leaders of Today, Teens to Titans.